Hello, and welcome to our conversation today as we discuss how to unlock cloud potential, migrate and transform VM environments at lightning speed. I'm Scott Sinclair, Practice Director with the Enterprise Strategy Group, and I'm joined by Craig Fletcher from Google Cloud and Mike Fink from VMware, and we're going to discuss best practices and strategies for cloud modernization and migration. But before we get to that, let me give them a chance to introduce themselves. Craig, why don't you start us off?
Thanks, Scott. Hey, I'm Craig Fletcher. I've been at Google Cloud for almost 4 years. Before coming to Google Cloud, I actually worked at VMware for almost 5 years, and then I spent my entire prior career in corporate IT. So I feel like I have a nice blend of both being on the solution provider side and the customer side throughout my career.
That's impressive. Mike, go next.
Thanks, Scott. I'm glad to be here. My name is Mike Fink. I'm the Global Technology Director at Broadcom, and I focus exclusively on Google Cloud VMware Engine. I spend most of my time with our joint customers, helping them understand and adopt GCVE to power their cloud infrastructure, modernization projects. And like Craig, I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Me too. I mean, honestly, I should be thanking you guys to get your expertise in the same room, or I guess virtual room as it is, as we talk about really, something that is an activity that I want to say almost literally every single organization in the world is doing constantly. And that is cloud migrations. And how do we make these simpler? How do we help accelerate these activities? I introduced myself a little bit at the beginning. I'm Scott Sinclair. I'm a practice director at the Enterprise Strategy Group. For those of you in the audience that may not be familiar with the Enterprise Strategy Group, we're an IT analyst firm. We do a ton of strategy work. We do a ton of research. And I'm going to use some of our research today, kind of, pepper that in a little bit to set the stage for the conversation. I think one of the big things that is core to every single cloud modernization or migration activity is how can we best leverage public cloud services such as Google Cloud to create a better business. So when we ask organizations, what are the drivers for cloud migration, for the leverage of public cloud services, we see just a wealth of just transformational business benefits. For example, 52% of organizations said, look, we leverage the cloud to improve time to value for all of our digital initiatives. 50% say we need better access to innovation and functionality. So that's why we leverage the cloud. 48% say we're looking for improved risk management that comes via the form of resiliency as well as better security. We see 47% saying improved TCO. So, if you kind of sum it up, and that's the top four, that list had quite a few more. So if you sum it up, organizations are basically saying, look, we want to be a more successful, less risky, faster, better time to market company. And that's what the cloud delivers. Mike, though, I could sit and talk research all the time, but I want to start with you and get your expertise, particularly from the VMware side, and look at some of the big drivers that you see that organizations have for cloud migrations.
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Well, I'm just going to have to echo what you said already. And, just speaking realistically, I mean, one of the big drivers for a lot of our customers remains cost. Google Cloud VMware Engine is driving extremely significant cost savings for a lot of our joint customers. And what that winds up with is just an incredibly fast payback period and a tremendous 3-year ROI. One thing I'd like to say is, these numbers are not made up. This is not theoretical. This solution has been in market, joint solution's been in market for several years. We have a lot of customers that are actually seeing this, and this is real world data. But on top of that, it's not just direct cost savings. It's also the time saved and the increased agility that our customers get when they go into Google Cloud VMware Engine. And that time savings really goes across a bunch of different disciplines. It's all the infrastructure stuff. So you have networking team saving time, storage team, compute team. And what that winds up with, as a net result, our customers are seeing a significant reduction in the time required to keep the lights on and allowing them to focus a lot more on their value generating activities. Another big benefit for a lot of customers, and one of the big drivers, is this on-demand provisioning, right? We spin up a workload as needed. We use those servers for a period of time, and then we return that capacity and we stop the billing. And finally, one other I'll touch on just for a second, we'll talk about it later, is license portability. This is a new one from VMware and Google, and it's allowing our customers to take advantage of their VMware investment across both on-prem and Google Cloud VMware Engine. It's been a huge topic of interest with a lot of our customers. And like I said, we'll talk about it a little later.
Mike, thank you so much for that. So much of what you said, we see again in our research, right? That ability to turn cloud infrastructure on quickly and the cascading effect that that has in terms of benefits. As the faster we get access to infrastructure resources, the faster we can deliver those digital initiatives and the faster we can see that payback back to the organization, as well as the ability to offload those mundane infrastructure tasks to the cloud and allow our internal personnel to focus on maybe higher value activities. Craig, I think this is a really great time to pull you into the conversation because Google Cloud has been tremendously successful in this area. Love to get your insights into some of the top motivations for cloud adoption that you see with your customers.
Yeah, definitely, Scott. I think it's good to reiterate and to double down on some of the things that you and Mike already shared, because I do work with a large amount of our Google Cloud customers who are migrating over, and it is true. When you talk about cost, you don't want to forget that you can change your operating model to an OpEx versus a CapEx. A lot of times our customers are at that decision point. Do we refresh everything? Do we get a new colo lease? Not only hardware, software, but also the environment itself. It can be very, very costly. So some of the more tactical things like, maintaining the hardware, the data center environment, lifecycle management, those are all very true. But also the elasticity is also a fact that our customers love to take advantage of, that they're not used to on premises. And when you talk to them about the benefits after migration, it's kind of a new world to them that they're enjoying. And then the high availability, there's an SLA. It's on us. It's on the cloud provider to provide that high availability and those lifecycle management tasks. So, while no cloud provider is perfect, our SLAs for availability are very, very high, and we're very, very consistent at that. We invest heavily in security. I mean, we have to design our environments to be protected against nation state level attacks. That's very hard to do with your own budget and your own entity as a private business. We have to ensure compliance with regulatory demands. And we're also always focused on carbon neutrality and environmental sustainability. So all these things go into being a leading cloud provider. And then once you get past those, I would say general topics, I would invite everybody to go watch our CEO, Thomas Curry, and his keynote from last week at Google Next. The higher level services, you get that immediate access to bleeding edge capabilities like generative AI and analytics that are just impossible to develop and maintain at that pace, within your own environment. And you can also experiment with these things. You don't have to build them out first. Without a big investment, you can try out these new capabilities very, very easily with cloud technology. Scott, if you'd like, I can go through a couple examples that, we were just hearing about at Next last week, so they're fresh in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we get to that, just to kind of comment on Next, very impressed with a number of the announcements. I think one of the big, we hit on a bunch of the benefits, and I think you'll get into it, but the ability of, once you're leveraging cloud services and you have your data in there, the ability to leverage all these additional tools and services to maximize the value of your data, I don't think can be oversold. I guess that there's so much tremendous value to that. But yes, go on. I want to hear some of these examples.
Well, even before we do that, I guess I'm just thinking, if you rewind that list of, the well-known attributes of cloud services, VMware Engine applies directly to that, right? The OpEx, the not maintaining the environment anymore, lifecycle management, on demand, high availability, compliance, Google Cloud security is inherited throughout that environment. So VMware Engine is certainly a first-class citizen, and we consider it a Google native service because we support it, we engineer it along with VMware, but we have made significant investments in staff and resources, and you can enjoy all of those, I would say, cloud attributes from VMware Engine. But, last week I heard from countless customers, a couple of them that come to mind that they actually presented where they used VMware Engine not only to migrate over to Google Cloud, but to leverage some of those native services. One was UKG, and Giovanni Peralto presented this at the conference. They're a $4 billion SaaS business with about 80,000 customers. They were having some of these very concerns we're talking about, elasticity and scaling out. They'd go through M&A or they'd win new contracts, and they'd need to add significant power to their environment. It would take them several months. not only just waiting for the gear to show up and some of the tactical things of going through procurement, but then the debugging even of scaling the environment. It got too complicated for them. Their tech stack was updated over here and brand new over here. So just maintaining similarity throughout the environments, it's really hard to do. And UKG wasn't allowed to spend as much time as they wanted to on some of those higher level outcomes that really make their business better. So they went kind of through what goals they achieved. They were able to migrate very quickly from their on-premises environments to VMware Engine. They did an analysis and they knew that a lot of their applications weren't really able to be refactored, or the value wouldn't be there to do that. They wanted to keep them how they were. They had multiple reasons to exit data centers. They said it was 86% faster. I don't know how they calculated that exact number, but that was the number they gave us, instead of replatforming. And then they were able to rapidly scale. They were enjoying better availability and performance SLAs. Their developers were really happy. Their developer productivity went up because they had uptime, performance, environment provisioning, with the click of a button. So it was inspiring to hear directly from them, and it was a room full of customers just like them. And there was a lot of talk, after the session. Another one that comes to mind briefly is the director of IT at Rentokil, Mike Howell. He presented a similar story. Their refreshes were time consuming, inconsistent, the lead times, their procurement policies. There's just so much complexity, and they want to modernize, but they know that they can't run a serverless environment everywhere and microservices, et cetera. They're constantly doing M&A. And for a while, they had this little architectural battle of, we're going to do cloud native everything, serverless everything. They came to the realization that that is definitely not possible, and it won't be possible for many years to come. So they also did a migration. He showed a really cool slide that showed all the data center migrations into VMware Engine that were completed and the ones yet to come. And they were ecstatic with their results too, and they're still going. And it was all the same benefits that we heard from UKG. They all apply to Rentokil as well.
Yeah, and going back to what you mentioned about UKG, you talked about that, what is it, the 86% number that they calculated. I mean, the amount of effort that's applied to replatforming, especially as you think about, hey, we're going to shut down an entire data center. I mean, that can be sizable. So the ability to leverage something like what you guys are doing through the with VMware that can simplify that migration, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today, can be just transformational and life-saving. Because what you can also do, which it sounded like they were able to achieve, is you can keep those developer resources focused on net new innovation rather than replatforming. So, great value. But I do want to move us along and focus on migration. I mentioned some of our research at the beginning. Some of the things that we see is, and we've seen this over the past several years, this has stayed consistent, is just how pervasive and common migration activities are. So 86% of organizations say we regularly migrate applications and data from on-premises locations to the public cloud. And 83% say, look, the cost and time of refactoring, replatforming, this adds significant cost, complexity, and risk to cloud migrations. So the ability to simplify this with folks like yourself at Google Cloud, as well as with tools from VMware, just can be transformational. Craig, let's stay with you. What are you seeing in the realm of migration specifically? What are some common concerns, maybe complexities organizations run into?
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but the first thing I would have to say is all of the customers we've worked with on migrations, I've only seen one reasonably estimate the level of effort and the level of time that it's going to take to replatform their applications. And they picked like a 5-year horizon. All other customers, when we meet with them, they say, we have, let's pick a number, 500 applications. We're going to replatform them all in 2 years, right? And then a year will go by and we'll meet with them again and they'll say, we almost have one finished. So that's been a really common theme. And I can empathize with that. I was a former Fortune 400 CTO myself, and all of our customer CIOs, they have this really big portfolio of applications. They're trying to rationalize and disposition them and figure out what they're going to do with them. And one of the common mistakes I think I see customers make unintentionally is that they have this sort of either or mindset, right? So you'll have some in the camp that are going to say, we're going to re-platform everything into microservices, for example. And you'll have others saying, we're just going to, we're just going to pick them up and move them as they are. And that's not reality. Neither one of those scenarios is reality. The reality is it's both and. It's not an either or architectural debate to have. You do need to go through your applications and decide what you're going to do with each one of them and for the right reasons. Another common issue I see is that a lot of customers struggle to ascertain the true cost that they're spending now in their co-located or on-premises environment. Oftentimes, all the costs aren't considered or aren't included. And so it's not an apples for apples comparison. A lot of times we're not including the cost of lifecycle management, maintenance, environmental costs, like the actual physical environment itself, power, cooling, real estate, etc. So, VMware and Google Cloud have value analysts and financial teams that can help you with that model and do it alongside the customer so that we all come to an agreement that, hey, this is an accurate analysis. The third challenge that I see often is the other thing that's underestimated is the reskilling that's required if you've been running an environment a certain way for decades, which most enterprise, all I would argue enterprise customers are. This new cloud operating model, there is a significant learning curve to adopting that, and you're dealing with things you've never dealt with before, like billing account project IDs and quotas and just totally different concepts. And that might be the biggest hindrance to a cloud migration that usually catches people by surprise later.
I see the same thing. It's funny you talk about cloud migrations. We've been analyzing this. It's not just with cloud migrations. Our ability as humans to accurately forecast the cost and complexity of doing something, we tend not to be good at those things. So the importance of having the right tools and analysis up front to figure out what the right path is so valuable. And speaking of tools, actually, Mike, I want to get back to you and start talking about VMware and what you're seeing. Craig gave us a real good glimpse into some of the challenges people run into. What are you seeing at VMware?
Yeah, Craig hit most of them. So I'd say we can echo most of Craig's comments. Probably the biggest one is, Craig mentioned the skills gap, which it certainly exists when we're looking at the more modern applications and what it takes to get a customer, or what level of reskilling is necessary inside of a customer environment to do that. But couple that with the fact that almost any major enterprise has an incredibly deep bench of VMware expertise. So we don't have the skills or have very limited skills on one side. On the other side, we probably have half of our IT admins who are certified in, have run VMware for years, know exactly how it works. And when we couple that with Google Cloud VMware Engine, it's just such a natural fit for that type of customer because they're going to be able to use those skills and they'll be able to retrain the people as needed as we go through that modernization for those applications where it makes sense, but leverage what we already have in place for the legacy applications. And also, Scott, I'm not going to sit here, and I don't think Craig would either, and say that refactoring doesn't have benefits. Google has some of the industry-leading technologies in their cloud portfolio that provide a tremendous value to many of our joint customers. So let's talk for a second about what success looks like. And the most successful customers we see are leveraging Google native services where they can, and they're enhancing their VMware landscape rather than trying to jam a legacy application into a cloud native box that it might not fit and it just may not be appropriate. When we use a combination of the two, we get that on-prem and off-prem flexibility and a cost-effective solution that's kind of the today solution with an eye to where we want to go in the future.
Mike, I love that perspective. As I think about not just what we see in our research, but also what we see or what I hear in the conversations I have, it truly is that. It's understanding, okay, which applications are going to get the most value out of refactoring, okay? And then let's look at where we need flexibility. But the other key thing that you talked about, which has kind of been underlying the conversation, but I actually haven't called it out, I'm glad you did, is just the importance of having a experience that you're familiar with. Familiarity is key when we think about how do we accelerate operations and things that we do. How do we minimize the burden on staff because you don't have to learn something new, and as well as how do we reduce risk, because that tends to be where the mistakes show up, is when we do new things. So just some more kind of challenges we see within our research. Some of the top challenges of migrations tend to include things like, hey, how do we ensure that we're meeting security expectations when we move an app? How do we ensure that we meet cost expectations? 25% of organizations actually identified, look, the time and cost of learning new architectures is one of the top challenges of doing a migration. And then, we also see up there towards the top, the time and effort associated with actually doing the move. So every single one of those things is built with, underlying those complexities is the challenge of moving from one thing to a different thing. So our ability to stay common in that experience delivers value. So let's talk about how we help solve some of these things. Craig, what are some of the methodologies that you see among your the organizations you work with, your customers? How do they, what are they employing to simplify migrations?
Well, I'd like to break this into two separate categories: a business and operational angle, and then a technical angle for our technical customers and friends on the call. They're both equally important. So just a few key points for business and operations. This might be obvious, but you'd be surprised how often I see that this isn't there. And that's, you need to know an answer that you'd give your CEO, your CIO, of course, but your executive team on, because these are usually expensive, high effort initiatives, right? What is the answer to the question, this cloud migration will be a smashing success if the following three things happen? And then know what those three things are. It could be innovation based, it could be cost based, could be security based. But we need to know what our North Star is so that we all agree. And when I say we, it's the customer team. This is why we're doing this at a very high level. So you have a strong sense of purpose. The second thing from a business and operational standpoint is I see a lot of cloud migrations get stuck and not move for a year or more sometimes due to political and architectural consensus not being formed. So there's just ongoing debate about what we're going to do, what we're not going to do, and how we're going to do it. And oftentimes I'll just see nobody puts a stake in the ground and says, this is what the architecture is, this is why we're doing this, and this is the direction. And it seems like once that does happen, though, especially from like a leadership point of view, CTO, CIO, everybody on the team feels like, well, I now have permission really to do bold things and to move forward because we've decided at the executive level. The third thing I'd say is you have to plan and test really, really well. And that would actually begin also the technical side of this is, obviously you already mentioned knowing your security requirements, but you have to get buy-in from all the resources on all the teams that could cause objections. Even something like networking, you need a dedicated resource, you need a dedicated person from security. There's really no point in starting migration if these different teams within the organization can pull the plug, before you even get started. And you also have to know your application environment. So I always say you're going to spend more than half the time planning as you are actually migrating. And if you do that, your chance of success is much, much higher. But then the last thing is, from a business side, is identifying and communicating well with your application stakeholders, making sure you know what your user acceptance testing and QA scripts, success criteria, letting them know when things are happening, communicating them, and then having them test. However, I will say, sometimes I've seen migrations where they don't tell anybody. Once they get confident in the methodology, they just do it. They do it in the dark of night, if you will. And with the VMware technology, we can do these migrations with zero downtime often. And actually, nobody does know, but I still would recommend working with those stakeholders. Moving to the technical side, you should start with a POC or a pilot. It's the best way to learn about the products and make a decision. RFIs and RFPs just introduce a lot of paperwork. I know they're necessary, but they don't answer these real questions when you get into doing it. Secondly, networking is where I see these migrations fall down a lot. You have to know what your traffic patterns are. You have to know what it'll be after migration, even specific things like MTUs along the network path. I've seen that break things because partner interconnects and VPCs can be at different levels, etc. Not to get too technical, but if you don't spend time on that, then the migration will go wrong and you'll have to go back and troubleshoot. And I've seen escalations last for several days and it's like, oh, the MTUs were off. So it's just an example. Third, I'd say I see people overanalyze sometimes. Like you do need to know your application dependencies, but I've seen that take so long too. And I think we've seen more success with migrations where people move the systems and then only if there are objections by the application owners, do they move them back. Usually there aren't objections, by the way. It usually goes really well because we're good at this. And the last technical thing I'll say is have a copy of your core infrastructure components, have an instance of those things running in Google Cloud so you don't have to traverse back over the network to communicate with things like your time service and your networking services like DNS, etc. You want to build instances of that over on the destination side. Hopefully that wasn't too much information, but I'm pretty passionate about helping people with their migration so that it can go well.
You know, Craig, as you were talking, I couldn't help but remember that old adage, measure twice, cut once. And, for migrations, it is, it almost seems, success is highly correlated with how much upfront work you're doing in terms of planning. And then eventually we get to that phase where we have the capabilities, we have the tools to do that, where it happens over the night and no one knows, which is kind of that nirvana we're all looking for. And kind of along those lines of looking for that nirvana, Mike, can you give us kind of, let's get the VMware side of this. What are some of the ways and technologies VMware has to help people with migrations?
Yeah, and I'll kind of jump off on what was said before and tag on what Craig was talking about with, a customer who it took X amount of weeks or months to migrate a very limited number of applications when they were going through a full refactor, and talk about how that contrasts with what we do with Google and the VMware technology. So the technology I'm going to speak about today is HCX, a VMware technology that is included with Google Cloud VMware Engine. And basically, for those who aren't familiar with it, this is vMotion over distance. That's effectively how this works. We have an on-prem cluster. We have our Google Cloud VMware Engine cluster. We connect those two, and now we can pick up virtual machines, move them between the environments with zero downtime. So when Craig was talking about the customers who are doing it in the dark of night, this is likely the technology that they're using. And it just cannot contrast more significantly with what we see when customers are going through a direct modernization, right? It just takes forever. It's very difficult. They have to schedule tremendous amounts of downtime, get buy-in all across the organization. Once HCX is up and running, it really is as simple as an admin determining the time in which the VMs are going to move. The VMs then replicate. They conduct that move operation. They're now running inside a Google Cloud VMware Engine. So it includes a couple different technologies. The live migration that I talked about, bulk migrations, we can do them all in the background if you can take down time with the workloads. A big one, and Craig touched on this already, but I'll just highlight it, is it solves a lot of the networking issues. And specifically, I'm talking about L2 extensions, trying not to get too deep in the weed here. But it allows us to move the VMs without changing IP addresses, which for a lot of customers dramatically simplifies the operation. And then finally, we also get the WAN optimization. So depending on how big your pipe is between your on-prem environment and Google, that can have a very dramatic effect on the amount of time it takes to move that workload and, of course, get it fully migrated into Google Cloud VMware Engine.
Mike, you had me at super vMotion. Frankly, that vMotion, when that showed up in the data center, gosh, I don't know, was it over a decade ago? That was so transformational. If we think about just how distributed organizations are in their hybrid cloud environments, just having something that gives us vMotion-like capability over distances is really game changing in terms of getting us to that nirvana where we can move things in the night where people don't, the users don't experience the delta, but then the business gets to see the benefits. And Mike, let's stay with you because I do want to dive a little deeper into the benefits. I think we hinted at some of them throughout the conversation, but you have customers using this right now. What are some benefits you see with customers? What could prospective users expect to see?
Yeah, so let's start with what they can expect to see, because that's a very simple answer. It's from the VMware perspective, the same interface, the same configuration, everything you're used to on-prem without some of the management headaches, the hardware, and the running and maintaining of a data center. So it's a very simple answer. It's also a very powerful answer. As we were talking about before, a lot of people familiar with that. You have a lot of people on staff already who know how to run VMware, and they can take those skills, move them directly into Google Cloud VMware Engine. But talking about some of the other advantages that our customers are seeing, one of the big ones we see from customers is the integrated life cycle. So a lot of customers struggle with the VMware upgrades, going through the process. VMware is, we talk about it as one thing, as you guys and many are aware, it's maybe dozens, potentially even more software packages that comprise a VMware landscape. Google brings that lifecycle completely in-house. So as a Google Cloud VMware Engine customer, you stand up the environment today, the environment gets lifecycled as Google goes through their UAT process, and you as the admin don't have to worry about that. The on-demand and multi-year terms really allow us to align business needs, right? So what we typically see customers are doing, and this is a big advantage when we go into Google Cloud, is they'll take a multi-year term for their base infrastructure, the core of what they need, and then they'll use that on-demand flexibility to be able to take advantage of bursty workloads, test dev environments, things that you might not need running all the time. And that is a huge area where the cloud economics start to tilt from, oh, it's a little better in the cloud to it's dramatically better in the cloud, because I just don't need to duplicate so much of my infrastructure once I make that migration. One thing we didn't really talk about very much is the networking that's available to you as a Google Cloud VMware Engine customer. So when you're inside a Google data center, you're riding on the Google networks, the same networks that deliver things like Google Search and the other Google utilities. And what that means to an end user, putting it very simply, very low latency from wherever you are in the world into your GCVE environment. And that's a rather unique Google benefit, because they have a private network that they build out, and we're riding that network with that GCVE infrastructure. So really, really nice benefit, and something that just comes by default out of the box for all of our Google Cloud customers, or Google Cloud VMware Engine customers. And then the final one I'll touch on very quickly is that VCF license portability. So customers today who are working with VMware and are entering into the VCF subscription terms, which is the new term that VMware has available for our enterprise customers, those customers are getting, as part of that contract that they're signing with VMware, full portability into Google Cloud VMware Engine. So you can take those licenses that you buy today, run them on-prem for a period of time, and then when you make the decision that you're ready to make the move, you take that investment, you move it to Google, and you're able to continue to leverage exactly those licenses without additional cost. That's a tremendous benefit. It's something that has just been released, and Google, as of today, is the only place that has that portability offering. So really significant benefit to a lot of our customers.
Wow, Mike, I'm just going through the math in my head, just in terms of that license portability. It gives you not only the fact that you get the savings, but essentially you get more control over how you plan out those migrations, right? If we're not ready to migrate, we can leverage those licenses now, but then we have the ability to move them to Google Cloud when it makes sense for us. That's really fascinating. The other thing too that I had to pause and think about for a while was the latency aspects of the Google network that you brought up. That's not something, I don't think that's something a lot of people think about, but it makes tremendous sense. We see, for example, in our research, as organizations start to think about how they deploy applications, understanding the networking and the latency plays a huge role in trying to figure out what success looks like and what a successful experience looks like when an app is deployed. And the ability for Google to have that is incredibly beneficial. Craig, here we are, we're talking all about Google, and we should probably bring you into the conversation. Mike gave us a bunch of benefits out of here. What are you seeing from the Google side?
Yeah, you guys are making me recall something that was said in my interview when I first joined Google. I asked this guy, why should I join Google? Because I was looking for a career change and talking to other hyperscalers, I'll say. And one of the things he said is, this planet scale network we have is absolutely incredible and blows the door off of all other networks. And I thought, oh, I thought he was going to say something fancy about advanced analytics capabilities, et cetera. But, this particular gentleman, the senior director level, he told me time and time again, not only the reach, you can get applications right next to your customer, but the performance, the reach, the resiliency, we have cold potato routing, it's called, the bandwidth, it's unparalleled in the industry. So you're just reminding me of that planet scale network. I'd never heard that before. But going back to your actual question, we have lightly covered, migration best practices. And I say lightly because if a customer wants to move forward, they would obviously engage our center of excellence, our services teams, and VMware's architecture teams, and we would get really, really deep into that and make sure that this goes very, very well for them. So we've covered that. We've covered a lot of the infrastructure-based benefits. Mike did a great job covering the VMware Engine one specifically. So as kind of a lifelong infrastructure guy from the mid 90s, this AI and Gen AI stuff is, I haven't been resisting it. I've just not been paying enough attention to it because I have migrations to work on, right? And VMware Engine to work on, but I can't resist it. And the more I see it, the more excited I get about it. I really can't help myself. A lot of things in technology, you have to hear about them and talk about them for a couple years, it seems, before you really understand. And I think Google Cloud Next last week really brought it all home for me. AI is interesting for infrastructure people because you don't have a backward looking context to refer to. Like when you're thinking of cloud infrastructure, you still have on-premises infrastructure to refer to, right? Like compute, storage, networking, and now I'm doing it in the cloud. You get that. But when you start thinking about AI, it is a whole new world where if you do migrate to Google Cloud, all your data and applications are right next to this amazing ecosystem of tools that can help you write code, that can summarize documents for you. You can look at multiple RFP responses. It'll read them, summarize them, compare costs for you. They made some announcements, some new tools coming out, the new version of Gemini, Google Imagen or Imagine, Google Vids, like image creation, video creation. And then they got into all sorts of different generative Gen AI examples. And again, I would encourage people to go watch that. But just think about whatever industry you're in, AI can help you generate videos, pictures, words, applications, help you move, orders of magnitude faster. A marketing and advertising company, it can create unique marketing ad headlines and emails and social media posts tailored to all these different kinds of audiences with images to go along with it. Healthcare companies, the pharmaceutical industry, lengthy and expensive drug development cycles. So there's special purpose AI models that can analyze these huge biological data sets and suggest potential drug candidates, different interactions based on, the DNA of the person, the molecular structure of the pharmaceutical. You really have to open up your mind. And I can't think of hardly anything that generative AI and AI can't help a customer with. So getting away from the VMware Engine conversation a little bit and thinking about what you can really do to make your business better, to me is very, very exciting. Of course, I could talk at length about the VMware Engine specific benefits as well, but I think Mike covered that really well.
Craig, everything that you're saying aligns with, almost what we've been talking about for a while now is the, even going back to terms like digital transformation or cloud modernization. The idea of this was through modernizing your infrastructure, through adopting the cloud, you're able to get your business in a better location to take it better advantage of innovation. And now all of a sudden this Gen AI wave is hit, and our ability to leverage tools like VMware to make it very easy to get our apps and data in the cloud or within Google Cloud, it just puts the business at a better position to now, all right, let's go check out what these next level innovations are and how can we further the business benefits that we receive. But I want to give each one of you guys just a chance to, we've hit on a bunch of topics. We've talked about cloud modernization. We've talked about migration practices. We talked about AI, networking. Give you guys a chance to really sum up maybe some kind of one or two key takeaways for our audience, a little bit of advice that our audience can leave with. Mike, let me start with you. What's one or two pieces of advice that you have for our audience?
Yeah, and I'll just given the time, I'll try and keep it somewhat short, Scott. But I think there's really two that I'd like to highlight, and we've really been touching on it. I'll try and put it in a very limited number of words. When you're looking at a cloud provider, choose based on where you want to go, not where you are today, right? And that could be AI, it could be data analytics, it could be a big data need. But overall, look at the application catalog that exists inside of the various cloud service providers. And of course, Google has an industry leading one, and see how it maps to the things that you want to be doing in the future so that you can take advantage of those modern applications and those new capabilities with the data and the infrastructure that exists inside of your VMware environment. And then the other one is just a quick one. Don't be afraid of partners, right? We at VMware, Google, we have a tremendous number of partners who can help you make both the migration, which as we've said is very simple, but let's make sure we get it done right and done easily, but then also that modernization journey. There's a lot of good partners out there. This is not something that you as an end customer have to take on yourselves. Let us help you, let Google help you, and let our partners help you.
Yeah, great advice. Craig, how about you?
Well said, Mike. I mean, I'll double down on let us help you. Even though VMware-based migrations make migration easier, don't try to do it by yourself. Let the experts help you who've done this 100 times. It'll get done faster and it'll get done right the first time. I already said it before, but when it comes to your migration, think both and, not either or. You can completely rewrite some of your applications. Some of your applications, you need to move them how they are and then transform them from there. It's both and. Get aligned with your executive teams and surround your VMware engine environment too with complementary other Google services. And I guess lastly, zoom out, think bigger picture. When you're thinking about a cloud migration, maybe you're thinking about migrating on VMware engine. Think about your lines of business, the people running your business, and ask them if they could, the cliche, if you could wave a magic wand, what do you wish technology could do for the business? Chances are, whatever they say, we can help you with. And that's good for your career. It's good for your company. It's better for the world because your company is going to be more advanced and deliver more capabilities to your customers. And then the last thing I'll say is when you're doing business with Google Cloud, you're really doing business with all of Alphabet too. So that's even zooming out even more, right? Google Cloud is one of 20 some companies that Alphabet has. Let us come together and help you transform holistically.
And I can echo a lot of that myself. We see that in our research, in particular, the don't go it alone, right? Leverage partners such as Google as well as VMware. Mike, Craig, thank you so much for advice. It's been incredibly helpful. And thanks for your time today. For those in our audience that want to learn more about Google Cloud, VMware Engine, and everything that Google as well as VMware can do to help you in your own cloud migrations, please check out the links on your screen. And thank you for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.